confined to the bottom of the well of life, staring at the twigs and vines. I realize that I may be strong, but is that strength all I need to crawl out of the hole my life has become? Recalling failure after dreadful failure in my life, I realized that no, strength is not enough. I must be smart. That word may mean different things to different people, but standing here right now, under the intensity of the hawk's gaze, I realize that being smart means being prepared, confident, and resourceful. Oh, yes, being smart means being prepared. Peering into the black depths of well, I visualize myself stuck in the black mud. I have the strength to pull myself out, but I realize that the journey to the top is not an easy one. I realize that exhaustion will become a reality if my foothold on the slippery vines and rocks is not planned appropriately. I will be the first to admit that I have personally suffered the consequences of acting without thinking. Acting without thinking is common. I've done it many a times in my life. But you know what? I know better. Before I do it this time, I will take a look at the entire picture before climbing through the vines to my goal. Only after the course is strategically mapped out will I embark on the journey to the top. One foothold, one firm grasp after another. I will climb up and out. Friends, this is a passage from my guest's book, To Break or Bounce. As I was reading this book, I went through so many different emotions. I could relate so much. I cried several times. I laughed. I smiled. I celebrated, and I mourned a lot of things. I could feel every single thing in this book as I was reading. And the entire passage that I chose is because we're always struggling with two big negative emotions whenever we start something new or when we don't start things. One is the fear of failure. We are too scared to fail, the embarrassment, the shame, and everything else that comes with it. But the question is, the second feeling, that of regret, is that the bigger mole of our lives? Is that the bigger challenge that we need to overcome? And my guest tonight, she and I are actually going to talk about how regret is quicksand of the soul. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest. My guest is Dr. Shelley Plumb. And this beautiful woman, she's more than just a doctor. She's more than a media production founder. She's more than an author. She loves circles. And what we are talking about tonight is about circles of life, of failure, regret, overcoming, resilience, and success. And I know, Shelley, you and I have met only a few months ago, but the circle you have created in my life is that of resilience, is that of courage, which is what has always run my life. But you are a great reminder, a positive reminder of what life is all about. And I just want to say, just for the formal introduction, guys, Dr. Shelley Plumb, and pardon me if I don't say this right, was a podiatrist. Yes. I hope I said that right.
You said it 100% right. Yes.
She changed her careers. And now here's the thing. You can understand a doctor being an author, but let me give you the picture in between. from being a doctor for the kids, she became a media production person. She became a producer. She became a director. She went into media, an entirely different, stream, and nothing to do with with medicine. And that's where I believe a little bit of combination of recognizing what you really want, the regrets, the success, the process in between came in. So, Dr. Shelley Plumb, welcome to the show.
Oh, well,
And
thank you
I
so
hope I
much
did
for
some
having me.
justice to the opening.
You are amazing.
We
Oh,
can't
the
hear you. I
introduction
have a
made me
feeling
want
you have
to
muted
tear
yourself.
up.
Oh, no, hang on. There we go. There we go. We're all set.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to say that your introduction, I want to thank you. I'll tell you what, I mean, in the few months that you and I have known each other, I have such a connection, right? And it's just wonderful to connect with somebody who is like-minded and who resonates with topics like what is in the book. I can't thank you enough.
It is an absolute pleasure. Hang on. What's going on? All right. Technology is being annoying.
You know what? I understand that. It never
Live
behaves
streaming.
itself. No worries.
Live streaming is fun, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now I thank you because as I was saying and I was reading, and as I said, I hope I did justice because that paragraph, that passage is the biggest part of what I read over and over and over since I read your book first time.
Really?
And this is where the topic of regret, overcoming regret, recognizing that you are actually dealing with regret or not, and are you moving forward or not, that kept haunting me every single time. And when I was discussing this show with you, that's why this is one of the topics that constantly, and the minute you said this is the fun part, then this is where I say the wavelengths match. I was only just discussing at the moment, and you said, oh, here are the two topics that I can think about. The first thing you said was regret.
Yes.
And I instantly say yes, absolutely.
Right.
So I want to share something about my regret to begin.
I'd love to hear.
In my life, I've seen, like anybody else, I've seen good and bad. I've seen difficult. I've seen happy. I've seen success. I've seen failure. And I realized that even when I was successful, even when I started succeeding in my goals, something wasn't right. I wasn't happy.
Yes.
And I wasn't ready to take certain steps in my life to go on the path I wanted to.
Right.
And there was a constant, beating myself up that was happening. And that was, I was regretting something I didn't do. I was regretting not taking certain steps. I was regretting not looking for certain closures in my life before I could move on. And that regret kept eating me up to the point that despite having it all, I felt like I had nothing. I felt like it was all pointless. There's no meaning to success. There is no meaning to anything that I've achieved. And there's no meaning to having overcome the challenges that I've overcome because I still felt like a failure until I realized that I hadn't handled my regret. I hadn't addressed what's bugging me, and I hadn't taken any steps to move forward and take those steps. And the answer to having taken those steps is, like you, from being a system engineer, I'm now in media. So
yes, a big leap, right?
Totally different field, totally different thing. So,
right.
Shelley, this is where I want to ask you.
Yes.
Why is regret such a big topic for you?
Because I have spent a good portion of my life, wasting portions of my life regretting things. And I know you had mentioned the leap from being a doctor to being a producer, and I can tell you that when I first started in college, I was interested in production. I was interested in cameras. I was interested in television and all of that. And I think my experience with regret really started back then because, you know, when you're young and you're influential and people are talking in your ear, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I needed to go into medicine. I'm like, okay, so I listened and I went in, and I don't regret that because it's made me who I am today. But there was always, Sebastian, that little bit of regret. What if? What if I had done the production? And little by little, and that's the thing with regret, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about the quicksand for the soul, is
Yeah.
that regret takes your soul and latches onto it a little at a time. And the harder I tried to ignore it, the bigger it got, the more it latched onto me until I could not ignore it anymore. And I made a tough decision. Little by little, I let go of the doctoring and increased the production. And I'll tell you what, every day is an adventure for sure, as you know.
Absolutely. And I just want to read my own comment because I really want to. Before the show started, I did say one thing is for sure, I'd never regret having you on my shows in my life and on this exciting journey called life. So thank you.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
Now, producer, if you can show me some other comments, there you go. Alicia said, very poignant passage from Shelley Plumb book to break or bounce. That is the passage that really, as I said, I don't even remember how many times I've read it now. That's how
Um,
important that passage is.
yeah.
Alicia says, so excited to be here with Shelley Plumb and Szebastian Onne. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for directing and keeping me on the leash because I am out of control.
You know what?
And
You have a leash. You know what they have on me? They call it. I'm the balloon, right? And the helium balloon, and I have all these people hanging on the strings. That's what they tell me.
well, there you go. And Alicia is saying, when I was getting ready for school, I too wanted to do media and acting.
Really?
But didn't feel I had the talent to do it. And she's making a sad smiley. But you know, here's the great part. And because I already know, she is now an actor. She's an established actor. She is.
Yes.
We are running Romaniac TV together, so she is in media, and she's everything that she wants to be. Because I think it's just about overcoming the regret and actually focusing on where you need to be. So let's talk about quicksand to the soul.
Okay,
Regret,
sure.
quicksand to the soul. What do you mean when you say that? I mean, we all know quicksand, but how is it a quicksand for our soul?
You know what? It's quicksand for our soul because if you think of your four limbs and you think of regret, regret might start out as a very small thing. And then as time goes on and your mind gets involved and you start ruminating about different things, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And it latches onto your arm, and your other arm, your legs, and drags you down. And the problem, just like with quicksand, once you're dragged down into the quicksand, it is really very, very difficult to get out, especially if you don't have that inner resolve, especially if you don't have that inner joy. You know, you were talking, Sebastian, right, about, you know, that happiness and that joy. And I have an interesting philosophy about, I think it's in the book too, about the difference between happiness and joy. And happiness is wonderful. We're all happy, but a lot of that is dependent on external circumstances and people. I think that joy is an inside job. I think that when you are complete within your heart, you are, and that joy is complete, that is the ultimate defense against that quicksand, against the regret, because you can't, in my opinion, you can't be regretful and joyous at the same time.
Right. And I just want to let the audience know, if you're tuning in right now, you must be wondering, where are you? Who are you watching? So this is actually the Almost Naked Conversation with me, Szebastian, and with me is my wonderful guest, Dr. Shelley Plumb, author of To Break or Bounce. So we're talking about regret. We're talking about regret, quicksand to soul. And, you know, as you were saying, happiness and joy, as I was reading your book, what I recognized is happiness is not only just external, it's everything that's happening around you, for you,
Mm,
but it's not necessarily inside you. You're satisfied, you're content, you're
right.
at peace. And what I realized about joy as I was reading, and I was thinking, joy is when you're not you may not even be screaming on top of your voice, you may not be jumping, you might just be lying in your bed, you might just be reading a book, or you might just be sitting in absolute silence, but
Yes.
have joy within, have that peace within that brings you the that actually adds value to all that happiness around you. you
Right.
know
No, I 150% agree. To be joyous, to be truly joyous, isn't mean that you're doing somersaults and jumping jacks. It doesn't have to, it's not always like that. I mean, some of the most joyous moments, and because you've read the book, some of my most joyous moments were quiet moments. And you know what? There was one factor though that was always present in my joyous times, well, even now. And you know what that is? It's light for
right.
the soul, being not in a dark place. And I think that's why that passage, and that's why I wrote it with it was a well that you were climbing out of. And that's why I wrote it, because I was, when there were times in my life when I was in deep dark places like that. And being in quicksand is very much the same, isn't it? You're in this
It
dark
is.
place that you can't get out of.
And
And
it's scary because the more you try, the more you dig deeper.
absolutely, absolutely. So you know what? Like we were talking about, the joy in your heart, the light in your heart, that will get you out.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about regret. A lot of the time, people don't actually recognize the regret itself. They don't
Mm,
recognize that they are sorry to themselves for having not done something, because
sure.
in this life with so much distraction, we are so focused on the noise, we are so
Mhm.
focused on the duties and responsibilities and the social structure and the obligations that we have. We don't give ourselves time to realize, is there something that I wanted to do that I haven't done, that I'm not happy about? Do I
Right.
regret having not taken a step or having taken a step?
Yes.
So how would you say can somebody recognize that regret? How would you say somebody can recognize that they are among all that noise, there's something going on that they're not even recognizing?
One word, very simple word, is resistance. If you are feeling, you're going throughout your daily activities and you're feeling like something's just not right, you have to listen to that. It's such a valuable intuition, knowing, that resistance is telling you that something is not right, that your mind and your heart are at war for the most part. And your mind is telling you, you know what, there's something you forgot here. You're not good enough. You didn't do this. You should have done this. And your heart is like, no, girl, you've got this. You're
Right.
fine. Just keep on going. Yeah. And regret, and I know you know this because you've read the book, but regret is a big part of the book. I have battled with regret with regards to my grandmother for quite a long time.
Right. And let's talk a little bit about that, because it
Sure.
is similarly personal to me as well. And I want to share a little bit. I'd like this to be a little bit more from, coming from our experiences as well, so
Sure.
people can understand. A lot of people don't want to admit what they're regretting or what they have gone through, and
Ah,
they
yeah,
haven't addressed.
right.
My father was murdered, and
Mm,
which is an entirely different story. And I didn't realize for a long time that I was regretting one simple thing, which is I regretted that when I had a chance, I did not go out there, go looking for him. I was a
yeah.
teenager. My
Right.
mother said, your dad hasn't come. This is not like him. And I was like, I don't care. He'll come. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Typical teenager.
Sure. Yes.
And for years and years, I carried that with me because I
Mhm.
regretted. And I thought maybe if I had gone, maybe if I had listened to my mother, maybe if I had, because my dad and I were really close. For me, it's like I lost my best friend. And it is until I address that regret and I recognize that I could have done nothing. I
Right.
could have done nothing in that situation. In fact, the scary part is if I had gone out looking for him, we both could have ended killed,
Yeah.
you know,
Right. Right.
and we both could have been gone. So until I address that, and this is where I say, until I
Mhm.
address that regret and recognize it and accepted it, that this is what I regret, this is what is hurting me,
Right.
I didn't even recognize the fact that I had no fault in it,
Yeah. Right.
right?
No,
So
I completely understand. Yes.
tell
Our
me a little
lives.
bit more about your regret with your grandmother.
Well, with my grandmother, there's actually two major regret themes in the book, and one is what you talk about is my grandmother. My grandmother was a beautiful woman, and she was my life source. And unfortunately, I did not realize how much until she had passed away. And the one major regret that I have to this day, and me speaking to you without crying is actually very, very good for me. Writing the book was like therapy for me. But my regret is that I was not with her when she died. My regret was that I did not spend time with her before she passed on. My
Hmm.
regret was that even years, looking back, time, I know now that time is so short not to spend that
Yeah.
time. So that is my major regret.
You're right. And I just want to request the producer just for a second to put me on solo to show something, another regret that I want to discuss, which relates to that. That's a picture of my mom and dad, and
Oh,
bring Shelley back on screen. So that is where
I
I
love that.
connected with your story with your grandmother and my
Yes.
life. What I regret, Shelley, is that is the last picture I have with my dad. And
Oh,
we both always took lots and lots and lots of pictures, right?
yes.
And I was a
Right.
teenager, but I regret not having taken enough pictures with each other. And, you know, just as you talk about your grandmother, that is the one common theme, again, I found in that book, not having done enough to celebrate the time together,
Yes.
not having
Yes.
done enough to just be in the moment and just be with each other every chance we get when we actually have the time. And after
Right.
that, the regret was there. So how did you deal with that regret once you recognize that, okay, this is what's eating me up? How did you deal with that?
I didn't deal with it well, and I will be the first to admit I did not deal with it well. And you know what? I know that. How can I say this? Some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to drugs, some people, manage it, effectively. But I turn to working. I'll be honest with you, just
Mhm.
overworking to be more correct. I dove right into my work and inundated myself and almost worked myself to death, if I'm honest with you, to the point
Right.
where I was close to a nervous breakdown. And that's how um, I guess inappropriately dealt with the regret of that is, the faster and busier I was, the less I focused on that. And I think that was my thinking at the time. But the problem is little by little, as I was doing that, I was working, 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 and slowly, time by time by time, I was losing sight of who I was. The Shelley that all my family and my friends knew was slowly being deleted, and it was not pretty at all.
And that's what I want to talk about, how when we live in that regret, we do not address these issues. We
Hmm.
do not recognize that we are erasing ourselves. So,
Yes.
for the audience, let's talk a little bit about how do we recognize that is happening? I know you said something really beautiful that, stop. When the resistance, you have to have that. Um, when you recognize that this is what I'm regretting and I haven't taken care of myself, I haven't listened to me, what are a few things that you think damages that happen because of not taking an action on time?
So you're asking me what we can do about the regret
Yes,
to get
I
ourselves out of
think
that state?
I think before that, I'm trying to sort of understand
Uh-huh.
what actions do we take, or
Mhm.
sorry, how do we even recognize that we are not taking any action and we are erasing ourselves? How do we get those signs?
You know what? We have to look at our lives. We have to look at our lives and really evaluate what our lifelong ambitions are. And that's something that I had to do. And when I was the doctoring versus the producer. And if you are not in line with your mission, in line with what your love is in life, then you most certainly on a path to regret.
Right,
And regret has some really, really awful children too, right? It has despair, it has pain, it has misery, and all of those things come along with it until they pull you down into that quicksand and you can't get out.
right. And how do we what steps can we take once we recognize, we know this is happening, we know that we are not really honoring ourselves, we are not taking care of ourselves, we are not listening to ourselves?
Mhm.
What are the simple things that we can do to start just looking after ourselves, start looking after our dreams,
Right.
and deal with that regret?
The first thing, in my opinion, is my problem was that everything was up here. Everything was in my
Right.
head. And, oh, sorry. Everything was in my head. So the very first thing that I did for me that helped me was to talk to somebody like you and
Right.
I talk. And I had a therapist at the time who helped me talk through some things. A best friend is great. Family members. The what that did is it helped me get everything out of my head and out, just out. And then the other thing too that I did is a form of journaling. And the writing the
Right.
book, actually, I meant it when I said was form of therapy. And again,
Mhm.
writing it all down, getting all those thoughts out of my head onto my paper so that my heart could really evaluate it and say, you know what, this is valid, this is not valid. So those two things really, really help me is, talking to somebody who I trusted, and
Right.
she knows who she is. She is out there.
Right.
And then, journaling, and then really taking care of me. I was at the time when I was really regretting everything. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't exercising. It was terrible. I was on a downward spiral into oblivion. It was terrible.
That's exactly what happens. That is exactly what happens, because you start punishing yourself. You start
Mm-hmm.
punishing for what you
Yes.
haven't done right, at least in your mind. And I just want to acknowledge a few comments. I see a comment from a Facebook user. That Facebook user, I'm assuming that you're watching us on Facebook group. So please come to Dromaniac TV page or YouTube so we can see who you are. And Alicia said, pictures. As I was showing that picture, yes, that is why I tell people to take selfies with loved ones as much as possible, even if you don't like how you look in pictures. It's not about you, it's about your loved ones. I actually want to handle that for a second. So producer, bear with me 1 second. I want to put that comment. I actually remember when Alicia did a live about this, and she was quite sentimental, quite emotional at the moment, and I realized it was important. And I think that is also handling, not necessarily regret, but handling what people don't understand. Your pictures are the memories. The pictures are everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Yes.
just about you. It's about when you're gone. That's all your family has, your loved one has.
Right.
And as I said, I regret to date not taking pictures. So I relate to that. Giving them an opportunity and legacy to remember you, not just in memory, but also having that picture is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes your only solace. That's the only peace you find, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
Chantel is saying, I'm a bit overworked, for many years. She's just commented on Facebook, and she said, I spent years over working and accomplishing. Stop looking backwards. So as we're talking, she's saying, stop looking backwards and go forward and actually
Mhm.
look into what's ahead. But that is it. A lot of people do regret overworking, not paying attention to family, to life, to what
Right.
they love, right? So, and I know I'm getting a bit sidetracked here because it's just,
No,
it
you
is
know what?
overwhelming. It
What
is
you're saying.
overwhelming at times, right?
Yeah, what you're saying is just ringing so true. And what's really coming to mind right now is a rear view mirror, believe it or not. Regret, isn't it? It's what we see in the rear view mirror. And
Right,
there was a point in my life after I was reading the book, and I'm like, you know what? I have no business looking backwards. I'm not going that way.
right.
Forward ahead. You know what? Figure out what I want to do, and that's where we're going. So, oh my goodness, it was then that regret was going, loosening its hold, and a joy was starting to replace it. It's awesome.
And that is the only way to come out of that quicksand, to
Yes.
actually let go. Um, if you keep looking back, you're constantly going to beat yourself over it. You're constantly going
Yes.
to say, I did not do this. I did not do it right. I did not do enough. I did not do this.
Right.
And, and that brings me to just reminding the people, this is Almost Naked Conversation on Dramaniac TV. I'm Szebastian Onne, and with me is my incredible, our premium influencer guest, Dr. Shelley Plumb. And we're talking about regret, quicksand for the soul.
Yes.
And Shelley, as we're talking, same thing. Once you realize and once you start moving forward, you start dealing with the regret. How did your life change? How do you think it helps others once you get over that regret and recognize the positive side of life?
You know what? I think that it's twofold. Is first of all, you know what? Every now and then, don't get me wrong, there are inklings of regret that kind of come into my head, and what I've learned to do is through the confiding in my best friend, and through my journaling that I have been through writing the book, getting that out of my head and onto paper has significantly helped. And
Right,
it's interesting because many people struggle with regret, but it's not something that we have to struggle with. I mean, as long as we really recognize it for what it is, and then really be able to say, okay, I recognize you, you are there, give it, don't try to ignore it, don't try to put it under the rug, say, okay,
right.
you're there, but are you realistic? Is that feeling realistic? And if it is not, you know what, you just have to let it go, like you were saying.
Right. And that's it. Recognizing, am I being realistic about this? Am I being,
Mm-hmm.
pragmatic about things? Because it's, yes, we are human beings, we're emotional, but sometimes we have to take ourselves out of that circle, out of that box, to see what's happening. What are we going in a cycle of, and change that negative circle into a positive one? And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see a couple of other comments Chantal just made. Yes, the hardest thing was for me was for to face front and go ahead. um, Let it go, exactly as
Yeah.
we are discussing. Let it go. You have to let go before you can move forward.
Right.
And she
Right.
says, I say to myself, stop that right now. Stop. As you just said,
I
resistance.
love that. That is actually in the book, Sebastian, where you say
Right,
stop, and you do have to let it go. I mean,
right,
it's I don't know, and two, and tell me what you think about this. Is that some of my regret in the past had to do with people talking in my ear,
right.
saying, "Oh, why didn't you do that?" Or, "Ooh,
Oh
you
my
should
God.
have done that." And I have actually, in the book, I refer to a bubble, if you remember that part.
Yes,
And
I do. Yes.
yeah, and you have to really determine which people have your best interest at heart. You keep them in your inner circle. Those that don't, you wish them well, but they have to stay outside the circle because they do you no good that way. So it's fascinating.
Wow, what you just touched on right now is a Pandora of worms.
Mm.
It can
That's my
really be,
skill.
but that is exactly true. And Chandel says, I hope I'm saying the name correct, Chandel, stay in the moment. That is
True.
it. That
Yes.
when you're listening to these, not only, hey, you already have your voices in the head, which are doing all that damage, right?
Right.
You're
Yes.
already dealing with a monster that's working 24/7 with you. On top of that, you have these people who, at the moment, you may not realize that do not have the best interest in their mind for you,
Yes.
but you're listening to. Because you know what? You are what you listen to, what you repeat in your head.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, you are defined, you and your life are defined by the 5 closest people in your life, right?
True. Yes. Yes.
And
No,
that
I would
reflects,
agree with that. Yes.
and when you allow them to happen, and as you were asking, true, I have had situations where I have gone and reacted to something or someone because of what was being told to me. And I think one part of resilience that you talk about in your book
Mm-hmm.
is to also listen to your voice within, to
Yes.
actually to one thing that you just said earlier as well, I want to bring that back again, that conversation to someone you can trust. And even in the journal you talk about, that's a
Mm-hmm.
conversation to
Yeah.
me,
Right.
having a
Right.
conversation with yourself. Because how it helps is, when you're writing it, you're just writing it, but when you read it back, the conversation
Oh my
completes,
gosh. It's so impactful, isn't it?
and you
And
realize, oh wow, did I
yes.
just say that?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Conversation is huge. And I want to take it to a totally different angle for a second.
Okay, sure.
When we live with these regrets, when we listen to these voices, when we have all these reactions and not actually deal with the problem, we also create a huge struggle for ourselves towards our mental health.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that the truth? It
As you
is
were
so
saying, it
true.
takes you towards a downward spiral. You
Yes.
stop looking after yourself, you stop loving yourself. And you have been a doctor, so I know when people come to doctors, they also actually go into things. I'm sure you have experience. They're talking
Mm-hmm.
about illness, but they then go into their personal lives. They
Yeah.
talk about how it all happened. So that conversation, um, that that effect that it has on your mental health, that negative conversation,
Right.
how do you
Yeah.
deal with that? How do you take care of yourself that way?
You know what? That's a great and very interesting question. And I think the answer to that is that I have learned to quiet my mind. My mind, up until the last few years, has been crazy with all that activity and all that working and trying to forget different things. And I have learned that my mind is very much like a book. And I know you've read the book, so I go into that. But if you think of a book, you have words, you have sentences that are on the book. And I liken that to people talking to you, okay? But when
Right.
you actually physically quiet your mind, and my thing is my morning walks, I'll go for a morning walk. It's like a meditation for me. I'm
Right.
able to actually, that enables me to actually take those lines and read between the lines. And
Mhm.
that reading between the lines, that is where the soul is. That is where your true meaning is. And it puts it all in perspective. When you're able to read between the lines, you're able to silence all the mind chatter. It is just, it's freedom. That's what it is.
And it is so important too, because when you actually, that's that walk or whatever your activity is, where you're spending time with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you're just running away from all that noise and focusing on yourself and having that conversation within,
Yeah.
which is unfiltered, and also not polluted by anybody else's thought, is where I think you connect with yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
recognize your strength. And I love in your book, To Break or Bounce, you talk about resilience over and over and over. That's
Yes.
where resilience builds in you.
Oh, yeah.
When you let yourself, I guess, just listening to yourself, to your inner voice.
Yes. Yeah. You have to do that. That's what, resilience is all about. And I, by here's the thing is if you start really not listening so much to the outside mind, the chatter from other people and, people who don't have your best interests at heart, really start listening to your heart, and then things start going your way. Oh my gosh, how liberating is that? Then your confidence
Absolutely.
builds, and then you one step after another, and pretty soon you don't have time to look back, do you? You don't have
Right.
time to look at that regret. So it's really, really fun. It's wonderful.
Well,
Wonderful.
that is something we need to focus on. That every time you're wasting a moment in that regret, in not dealing with things, you are wasting a moment that's never going to come back.
It's
It is
true.
it is not returning to you,
Right.
right?
Right.
Alicia says, "Oh yes, people talking in your ear is so destructive." As we were talking about earlier, only allow a few people to speak into your life. That is right. It does take time. It does take a little bit of understanding who's the right person. But
Yes.
once you recognize, and Shandell says very beautiful thing, boundaries become very important. They
Oh my
do.
gosh, they so
Being
do.
able to
Yeah.
say no.
Right. Yeah. You know what? It's funny. I have criteria now for my boundaries, believe it or not, because I have not been a good boundary girl my whole life. I will be the first to admit that. The word that I had a problem saying was no, and I now put that the boundaries. Do I need to put up a boundary? I'll ask myself that, and then I put two categories up: constructive versus destructive. And
Right.
if I deem what is coming at me is destructive and not helping me at all, then that boundary goes up. If they're, on the other hand, constructive criticism, it's meant to make me better and in a loving way, well, then those boundaries stay down and you listen. So yeah, that's just one of my personal
Right.
things that I do.
That is actually very important, and that's
Mm,
that understanding that and realizing that importance of the boundary. And it's not easy, but getting there one step at
yeah.
a time changes a lot of things. You get the control back in your life,
Right. Right.
the
Yes.
positive
Yeah.
control that you need. And let's talk for a second about regret versus failure. I think a lot of time people
Mm.
don't, they're just too scared.
Uh-huh.
We don't want to be failing. We don't want to have the embarrassment. As I said in the opening of the show, the embarrassment is so big for us. The feeling of not wanting to fail is so big for us that we don't allow ourselves to even try. So
That is true. Very, very
right.
true. I
So
agree. Go ahead.
please, I was just saying, would you rather fail or regret?
It's funny that that's an interesting question, because I view them the same for the most part. Meaning, when I look back on things, I think that we regret certain things, and we view that as a failure, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah,
Meaning, yeah,
absolutely.
for me, with my grandmother and not being able to say goodbye to her when she passed on, I look back at that and I failed, Sebastian. I failed to be there with her. So that is a failure for me. But I, on the flip side of that, if we look at it in a different perspective, I would rather fail than regret not having tried, if that makes any sense. So
Right.
you can look at it two different ways.
Right. And look, I would say to that, and I'm no psychotherapist, but I would say to that, in my eyes, you didn't fail because A,
Mhm.
you recognize it now, and B, the thing is, sometimes life just has to happen the way it does.
Yes.
One thing that I do believe in is control what you can and let go what you can't. So you can't regret something that wasn't in your control. Maybe you think it was in your control. Maybe you
Mhm.
think that you could have done it differently. Isn't that what regret is? Because you think
Yes.
I could have done it differently. But
Sure.
what if you don't? What if you couldn't? You don't know that. So why
True.
live with that feeling that I didn't do it right, and instead learn from it that, okay, so this is what happened. Yes, I can't take it back, but
Yes.
maybe next time life gives me an opportunity, I'll do it better.
Right. Right. You know what?
Right.
I agree 100% with you. Everything, even though in our hearts at the time may not seem optimal, everything happens for a reason.
It
So
does.
even me having gone through that, and then the spiral that happened after that was meant to happen, because I know of different things that I am doing now and helping now that would not have happened had I not gone through that.
And you know
So
what?
mhm.
I will say to that, sorry for interrupting you. I would say
No,
to
no, it's
that,
okay.
because your grandmother is constantly coming to my mind, I would say yes, that regret was there with you, but look at the aftermath, that
Mhm.
you now have a book, and so many more people, thousands and millions of people, will now know your grandmother and her strength and her
Mhm.
resilience and her positivity and, you know, courage that you now embody because of her, because of what you at the moment
Oh,
thought is a regret.
you
So
are
I
you
think
are
it
gonna
was
make
meant
me
to be
cry.
this way. It was meant to be this way.
Yes, and you know what? Part of what is I know to be true is that there is a part of me, excuse me, a part of her in me, and
Absolutely.
I know that, and I know, and you know, I come to that realization years ago that even though she has passed, she's here with me, and I can feel that, and
And now, because of your
mhm.
book, she's here with so many people,
Oh
changing so many lives,
yeah,
right?
thank you,
So we're running out of time, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. I just want to quickly
thank
take a
you.
couple of other comments. So Chantel said, "Sometimes I'm the hardest boundaries to handle and keep in line," and and that's right. Boundaries within yourself
Yes,
can be the hardest,
right.
right?
Yes.
And then she says, it's either to teach a lesson or learn a lesson. I try to look at it this way now. Absolutely.
Great
Anything that is
comments.
happening, either
Yeah.
you're teaching something or learning something, and it is changing and helping you evolve. So we're running out of time, but I just want to
Mhm.
say thank you so much. And before you go, I just want to ask you, Shelley,
Yes.
how would you tell people, anybody who's going through anything that they regret, anything they haven't done, how would you say can they now start to look at life differently and change how they think?
I would tell them to focus on three primary areas, and really to really focus on these areas, really silence all the mind chatter, go for their morning walk if they need to, and really focus on the emotions. And like we were talking about before in the talk we're having today, is get them out of your head where they're doing no good, get them either out, talk to somebody, get them onto paper. And number two is physically take care of yourself. I learned that the hard way, not taking, not sleeping, not eating, not exercising. Those things will do such really clears your mind so that you can see regret for what it really is. And that is misery that pulls you down into that quicksand. And then the
Right.
last thing is spiritually, is we have to take care of ourselves spiritually. And I don't necessarily mean by religion. I just
Mhm.
mean, uh, really know who you are in your heart. Allow your heart to speak. Silence your mind for a second and allow that heart to really have a voice.
Absolutely. That is so beautiful, Shelley. And I think we need to have this conversation again and
Oh, I
more,
love
because
it.
there's so much more that there's to share. Thank you so much, as
Thank
usual.
you.
Your beautiful inside out, your messages, your book. Anybody, please go and check To Break or Bounce. I believe it is available on Amazon as well.
Yes, it's on Amazon and I believe several locations, but I think Amazon is probably the most common.
Can we
Yes.
can we quickly tell people the new website that you have?
Yes, yes, I'm very excited about it. It's called drshelleyplumb.com, and it's basically has all about me, all about my, where I speak and talk shows, and a lot about the book. So we have a really cool newsletter that will be going out starting in the next couple weeks, and then also some blogs and all kinds of really, really cool stuff. Love to
I'll be
see
the
everybody
first
there.
subscriber. I'll be the first subscriber. And
Okay,
guess what?
great.
On all your new social media, I'm the first.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much. Really
I've already
appreciate it.
started stalking you in a positive way.
I
So
love
thank
it.
you
And
so
I love
much.
you. Thank you.
I
Thank
love you
you.
too. Thank you so much for being a friend, for being a mentor, for being everything you are. And I really, really appreciate you. But
Oh,
don't go anywhere. I'll see you in the green room in a minute.
okay. All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
So this was Almost Naked Conversation with me, Szebastian Onne, and Dr. Shelley Plumb was talking about regret, the quicksand for our soul, and how regret can really damage us from within, and what we need to do, how she handled it, what is important for us to do, to talk to ourselves, to give ourselves the self connection, that space from all the noise, and focus on listening to our inner voice and being positive and taking the steps. Resist all that is happening around you, reconnect with yourself and move forward. Don't stay right where you are regretting what you haven't done. Instead, live in the moment and work towards your future so that you can actually change those regrets into lessons and be a better person and live a life that really means something. So thank you so much for watching. This was Almost Naked Conversation on Dramaniac TV. And as we say on Dramaniac, dream big, make it happen, and we'll see you next time.